Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahul azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today we're looking at ayah number 72, which follows from the previous three ayahs. And for once we had to put 2 to 3 ayahs together because of the context of the ayahs, and they were all linked and interconnected. And it also explained something which needed for the three of them to be put together, so that I can do that, inshallah. So continuing with this ayah, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ قتلتم نفسا فادارأتم فيها والله مخرج ما كنتم تكتمون صدق الله العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and recall, addressing the Bani Israel, and recall when you slew a man and disputed over it, but Allah was to bring out that which you were concealing. So this is the following ayah to the previous three, and is actually in reverse order. And there's a reason and a wisdom behind that, and I'll explain that, inshallah. But the events, as they're put in the Quran, were actually different to the way it actually happened in real life. Now, having presented the excuses and rebellious behavior, the next ayah presents the reason behind which the whole event took, a murder. And that's what we're talking about. The previous three ayahs, they happened after this ayah. And this ayah presents the reason. Now, the reason why the two are in reverse order is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to highlight, and this is how the Mufassir have put it, Allah ta'ala wants to highlight the rebellious behavior of the people. That was more important and significant than the act of the murder itself. Because the act of the murder is a one-off action, and we don't learn much from it. What we learn from, or what we need to learn from, is the behavior, the rebellion. That's important because that's what takes people away from the deen. The act of murder can be resolved with tawbah. However, the act of rebellion is something which is deep-rooted and often continues for a long time, where it actually causes a person to make many fitna occur in society. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts that first. Further to that, also the Mufassir say that because we need to understand, we who read the Quran need to understand the behavior of people. And this is not to label any one group of people or community or nation to be in a particular way. No, the reason a story is there is almost irrelevant to the people that are going through that story, that are enacting that story. The reason it's there for us to derive lessons for ourselves today. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the emphasis first of the rebellious behavior and the excuses which we've discussed in the last session. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings about the actual cause, the actual context, which was the murder that had taken place. And the actual murder was, as I've explained before, a man asked for another man's daughter's hand in marriage. That man refused, and out of anger and spite, the person murdered the father of that woman. And when he did that, his associates, his friends, those close to him, hid the murder to try and get away with it. Now, as I said, the story is told in reverse order so that we may understand the rebellious nature of the people before hearing of the cause. That I've now explained, and the cause itself was this, this asking for the girl's hand in marriage. Now, the problem that they hit there was they were in the desert, and the Torah had yet to be revealed. So they actually didn't have a means or a way to enact justice. What were they supposed to do? They didn't have any investigative abilities as well, because the whole thing had been covered up very cleverly, very well. And as a result of this, they didn't know where to start. A murder had happened, a man was found dead, but who had done it and how to go about finding it was beyond them. And further to that, even if they did find the murderer, what was supposed to be the due process of justice? There was no Sharia. The book had not been revealed. So they had gone to Musa alayhi salam, asked him, informed him of what happened, and asked him what they should do to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah ta'ala revealed to Musa alayhi salam, tell them to sacrifice a cow. and hence the events of the previous ayah, that all the rebellious behavior then came out from amongst the people. Part of the rebellious behavior, now we can understand, looking back in hindsight, was not just the rebellion per se, but it would have been from the people who were trying to cover things up, that they would have made these excuses as well, so that the justice of Allah Ta'ala can never be enacted. That would also be a part of it, but obviously I could not explain that in the previous session. It has to be explained in this session, because we can understand the murder and the fact that the person who committed the murder had people to support him. Otherwise, I think a person on his own committing murder, he would get caught out very easily, very early on. So he was helped by others, and the whole thing was covered up, and that zulm, that oppression, that wrongdoing was done in a manner where these people thought they could get away with it. So, further to this, Allah Ta'ala is emphasizing that despite the murderer and his supporters trying to keep matters hidden, He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will bring the truth out. So this was the lesson for those people at that time, that regardless of all your very cleverly, very well planned, very cunning plots to cover this murder, to cover this oppression, to cover this zulm, that you can get away with it, that nobody will find out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises that He would bring it out in the open. And so He did. And I'll explain that in the next session, inshallah. But the point is that when these people felt that they could get away with something, they were not taking into account the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They had forgotten it, they become distant from it. And their rebelliousness was actually a means by which they kept away from Allah Ta'ala's understanding, Allah Ta'ala's power and ability. Because when a person is rebellious and hypocritical in the deen, then he becomes distant. He or she becomes distant from understanding the ability that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has of all creation, that He is all powerful, all seeing, all aware. They tend to forget that. So they feel that somehow if they can hide it from the people, it will be something that will be unknown, and they will not be taken to account for it by the people, and not be taken to account for it by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the waswasa, the whispering of shaitan to the people that do such things. But of course, as this story highlights, the culprits were brought to account by being exposed, and those with him were all exposed, and the matter was resolved. So this is the story of those times and those people at that moment in time. And now I want to look at the lesson for us today from this small event that seems relatively unimportant. And I want to have a look at that for what do we learn from this, inshallah, for today. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا فَادَّارَأْتُمْ فِيهَا وَاللَّهُ مُخْرِجٌ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ. And recall when you slew a man and disputed over it, but Allah was to bring out that which you were concealing. So now we need to go first of all further afield than just a murder. This ayah is teaching us, using the example of a murder, the principle that whatever we do in life and try to cover up that was wrong, it will eventually come out and become exposed. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing here. Taqtumun, that which you concealed, you hid it. It's another matter if somebody does something wrong and admits to it and confesses, then that's the end of the matter. And that's a measure of his or her righteousness, his or her humility. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all forgiving for that, as will be people around them. However, in situations where things are planned and executed and hidden from other people, and they are wrong, they are sins, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising that whatever you concealed will be brought out, and you will see it, and others will see it. So, as I say, the lesson here is for all people. Whoever and whenever an individual or group commit a crime and think it will not be discovered, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us here, it will be discovered, because Allah is the one who is in control, and Allah is the one who's telling us that it will be discovered, because He is the one who's going to make it discovered. He is the one who's going to bring it out and make it apparent that a person's crimes become exposed. This goes from the individual crimes, such as, for example, domestic violence, to grand schemes by organized crime syndicates. Allah Ta'ala is saying all will be exposed in whatever time that Allah wishes to do. And that is according to His wisdom, to His knowledge, and whenever He decrees it, it will be based upon His wisdom, His knowledge, that He exposes a person. Sometimes a person does something wrong, and almost immediately they're caught out. Sometimes it may take a few days or a few weeks. Sometimes it may take some months or a year or two. And sometimes the ulama, in fact, overall say that generally crimes that we commit towards other people, oppressions, zulm that we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often is known to allow almost 30 to 40 years to pass. And then after a 40-year period, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings that crime out. And this is for various reasons. One of the wisdoms behind this is this, that when somebody does an oppression to someone, when somebody does a zulm to someone, it usually is at a time when that person who's doing the zulm is in a position of authority and power over the other one. So what happens is that the person who's being oppressed is normally taken away from their family and friends, taken away from their resources, put in a condition where they may be weakened, they may be tortured, they may be imprisoned, they may be starved, they may be, in all different manners of ways to break down the human being. They may be in that situation. They may be vulnerable to begin with. However it is, the oppressor usually uses that opportunity to then bring out the actual oppression, to commit the actual crime, whether it's a murder, whether it's a rape, whether it's some other form of torture. Whatever it is that they wish to gain over the other person, the oppression and zulm that is done is usually always done at a time when the person who's going to be oppressed is alone, without friends, without family, without anyone to help them, without a means to escape, without a means to even have their own personal bodily resources. For example, they may be tied up, they may have been starved for a while, they may have been tortured, they may have been weakened in some way, so that even they're literally, physically, their bodies are weakened. So they're completely helpless, and then the torturer, the oppressor will kill them, rape them, whatever it is, that person will do that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom is such that first, He allows that person to have a long life. He lives for a while. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes him to a point in his life, in his 50s or 60s, where that person, their family is no longer around them. Their children have grown up and gone away. Their partners have died or gone away, divorced. And that person is left in a situation where they're old, perhaps even senile and weak. Their body has become weak through age, and their friends and resources and abilities are also gone over time. It may even be because of oppression to other people that they are now left in this state. But subhanAllah, that is the state they're left in. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes their crimes. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes their crimes, and they have no helper, they have no one. And this is the wisdom, because they committed that exact act upon the person who, in their bodily form, in their life, their stage, etc., they may have had everything going for them, but they were kidnapped or taken, imprisoned, etc., and all of that was removed from them. They were weakened and tortured and starved, and then the oppression was committed upon them. In the same way, Allah, through His wisdom, through life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the same thing to bear upon the oppressor. And we have many examples of this, from individuals to prime ministers and presidents and so on, who have done wrong to others, who have caused oppression or genocide upon others. And then in their old age, they have to face the misery of what they've done, and they are exposed at that time. And court cases occur and so on. And the society finds out what they were up to when they were younger. So this is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as I say, it occurs in individual crimes, such as domestic violence, and grand schemes as well. Individual crimes such as domestic violence, and I take that as one example. Obviously, there are many examples of individual crimes, but that is a great thing that is going on in the community, and especially the Muslims, and the brothers need to understand this, and the brothers need to remember this, because when they talk about why they did it, it's usually a case of being frustrated or stressed out and so on, that they had to lay a hand on their wives. This is unacceptable. To hit a woman is unacceptable. To beat her up, the very woman that is your wife, the very woman who has given up her whole life to be with you and dedicated her life to you and loved you from her heart, you would do this to her? This is completely unacceptable. There are a hadith about this where Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has spoken about this and spoken in a condemning manner about the man who will do this to his wife. And this is absolutely unacceptable. Many instances, men talk about the example of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Well, let's take a look at this example of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Because anybody and everybody can follow simple sunnahs, but this is the real sunnah. These kinds of sunnahs are the real sunnahs. Anybody can grow a beard. Anybody can put on a nice stove. Anybody can have, these kind of things smell nice with, attar and so on. Anybody can do that. They take very little effort. The beard takes no effort at all. You just do nothing and it will grow. But when it comes to the real sunnah of character, of patience and sabr with those who are in your charge, that is a measurable and a valuable sunnah to follow. And let's focus on that. Many men, they talk about, when it comes to polygamy, they talk about how, no, we can't take more than one wife because even one is enough for me. It's too much to handle even one woman. SubhanAllah, if that's the measure of a man that you are, that's between you and Allah. But leaving that aside, my point being, that if that's how you feel, that one woman is so stressful, and yet you want to talk about this sunnah, then let's look at the sunnah with respect to marriage. How many wives did Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam have? At one time, he lived with 11 wives, different ages, different personalities, different backgrounds, different even cultures. 11 wives at one time he lived with for a while. And he never laid a finger on anyone. Not just that, it never crossed his mind. It never crossed his mind to hit any of them in any manner whatsoever. He wasn't even in a manner of, he wasn't even aggressive towards them. He did not shout at them. He was not oppressive towards them. He was not cold-shouldered towards them. That's 11 women. So if any man talks about sunnah and any man talks about how more than one woman will be too much for him and wants to follow that sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then understand this next time you become aggressive towards your wife, your one wife. Understand this, that Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam dealt with 11 and left for us an incredible example of his sabr and his character. So that individual crime, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose. You may have beaten her at a time when she was very vulnerable, but you will come to a point in your life where you will be vulnerable, you will be weak, you will not be so strong, you will not be so aggressive then. And maybe someone somewhere will commit that violence upon you. So we have to understand these things will happen because always what goes round comes round. So people have to understand this. And this is why often you find old people in a very miserable state, talking about what they've done wrong, talking about how they shouldn't have done things the way they did them, talking about how they wish they could go back and change things the way they had done them in the first instance. This is the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon those who committed crimes. And this goes again to the grand schemes by organized crime syndicates as well, whether it's organizations like the mafia and so on, who have caused so much crime and the destruction of people, the ganglands, the war, the drug laws, the drug barons, etc., the crime syndicates in various countries like Mexico and so on. Whatever they've done, whatever lives they've destroyed, it will always come back. No one remains without punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised in this ayah, he will expose, and they will be exposed, and they have been exposed throughout history. It will not stop. Even after death, if Allah wishes, he will expose even after death. Such as the example of Pharaoh. Pharaoh who felt that he was God on earth. Pharaoh who declared himself to be God on earth. And yet, when the time came and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed him, in front of the people, he was always resplendent. But when Allah Ta'ala's moment came for him, people understood what he was really all about. So no matter how well planned and executed, how cleverly it was done, what technology was used, Allah Ta'ala will expose it. And that's another thing. In the past, people had to rely on one another to keep quiet. People had to threaten one another. People had to blackmail one another. In this day and age, we can delete things. We can erase things. And as a result of that, we think we've got away with it. But no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose. And many people do this with respect to simple things like mobile phones or computers, where they may download pornography, look at things that are haram, and then delete it, or send messages and then delete it, or receive messages and then delete them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Even in the electronic world, nothing is truly deleted. Nothing on social media is truly deleted. You may think you've deleted that picture, but it's not truly deleted. It's there. Once it's recorded electronically, it's there. It can be retrieved. by people who know how to do it. It can be retrieved. So this is the thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose such people, and they often get exposed. They think that they've deleted something and somebody else can hack in and take that picture and retrieve it, or take that message and retrieve it. So these things happen to people. So this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that whatever crimes you commit will be brought to bear. And this is for everybody, from the Pharaoh to the king or queen. Whatever we've done, as I said about the Pharaoh, he would dress resplendently in front of people. He'd come out in front of people, making people think he's so magnificent, he's so kind and caring, he's so great, he's such a God on earth. And people believed it, and people thought so. But when the waters came down on him and at the Red Sea, and when he was killed, and his body was thrown out and brought back to Egypt, then people realized this is just a human being like the rest of us. He's not a God. He's not related to any God. He has no power. He has no ability. And the truth of his reality came out and was exposed. People no longer believed in the divinity of the Pharaoh and the greatness of the Pharaoh. And that goes for all the kings and queens today, those who have ruled on this earth, and yet on the one hand coming out to the people looking resplendent and great, gracious, but behind closed doors, what were their crimes? Many of them were involved in human trafficking, in child trafficking, in sex trafficking, in sacrifices of children. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let people know what the reality was of the people that they subjugated, of the colonization that they performed on various countries and communities, of the slaves they took, of the gold they took, of the jewels they took, the diamonds, the rubies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it to bear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it all out and expose such people, whoever they were, wherever they were. That is the promise of Allah ta'ala in this ayah and various other ayat of the Quran. From the president to the prime minister, those people who have given the go-ahead for their armies to go bombing other countries, to destroy other countries' infrastructure, to not even let them sleep at night because the airplanes make sorties at night. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it to bear. These very presidents and prime ministers become senile and old and a laughing stock in front of the people. But that's just mild compared to what punishment is coming for them in the next life. No one gets away with it, from the oppression of individuals to the oppression of hundreds or thousands of people, from setting up prisons to putting innocent people and do it in such a manner that you cannot be challenged, such as Guantanamo. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it to bear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not let it go. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do justice against those who committed such crimes for the sake of those who had such oppression committed upon them. From the scholar to the committee, Muslims are not away from this either. The justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is over all people. Those scholars who do not care for what the people and their troubles are, who do not help them, who do not advise them, those scholars who themselves are in a situation where they are committing crimes, where they are allowing haram to become halal, those scholars who are taking advantage of young boys, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring to bear. Those committees who are running masjids like empty buildings, when the masjid is a hub for the community, when the masjid is the community's center and should be active, and they should be fulfilling the needs of the community in the masjid. Masjids have many things happening in them, and today they are empty buildings in most cases. Those committees are responsible. Those committees who haven't got a clue what the masjids, the rules around a masjid, those committees who themselves hardly pray. They who have been entrusted as trustees of the house of Allah should think again, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose what's happening to the money that people have given to the masjid committees. What is it being used for? Where is it going? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose their crimes too. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that, and He will bring it to bear. Whether it's the husband or the wife, parents or children, employer or employee, in every aspect of life, society and community, yes, one may oppress the other. And when that happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it to bear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it to bear upon people for what they've done. So we should all be careful. Whether it's the wife cheating on her husband, or the husband cheating on his wife, nothing is kept hidden. It will come out in the open. Whether it's the parents being oppressive to the children or the children neglecting their parents in their old age, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it out. Whether it's the employer who is not paying sufficient to the employee, or the employee who is taking his wage and not doing their job, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take all these crimes and bring them out in the open in His own time, from His own wisdom. And that is the life that all of us live. Whatever we've done wrong comes back upon us one time or another in the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only is the crime exposed, but it's also punished. In the life of this world, whatever we've done to whoever will come back upon us in some similar fashion. Whatever we've done, and in whatever way, will come back to us in a similar fashion in our lives in the future from that event. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise is that. So not only will we be exposed, but we will suffer the consequences of it as well. And I'll give you one story from our Islamic history. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, well, most people know, he was a ruler in just after the time of the Khulafa Rashidin, and he was known for his tyranny, for his cruelty. He killed so many great people of Islam, even amongst the Sahaba as well. And when it came to Sayyid bin Zubair, rahimahullah, who was a great scholar of Islam and a great muttaqi of Islam, and he tortured him and he was to kill him. And when he was about to kill him, then Sayyid bin Zubair protested why he would do this. And Hajjaj bin Yusuf, he warned him. He warned Hajjaj bin Yusuf not to do this. And Hajjaj bin Yusuf said, "Who are you? I've killed better people than you. Who are you to, put yourself forward as somebody of importance or greatness?" And Sayyid bin Zubair said to him, "I'll be the last person. After me, you will not be able to kill anybody else. I'll be the last person you do this to." And Hajjaj said in response to this, "I've killed better people than you." And Sayyid bin Zubair rahimahullah said, "Yes, you've killed better people than me, because they were able to forgive you. I will not forgive you. And that's what will be your undoing." So Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, with his arrogance, he did not listen to that, and he had Sayyid bin Zubair rahimahullah killed. But Hajjaj only survived for a week or two after that. And almost every night he had a nightmare where he would wake up crying out, telling people that Sayyid bin Zubair has grabbed my feet and is dragging me, he's pulling me out from my bed, he's dragging me, he's taking me somewhere. And he had this nightmare almost every night until the day he died. And on the day that he died of a sickness and an illness that really weakened his body so much that he felt so shivering cold, even in the warmth, that they had to put fire and build fires around him to keep him warm, and it still didn't help. And at that time, he gathered people around him and he told the people what he had done wrong in his life. He realized what was happening. And he told people that he was being punished for this. And he begged Allah Ta'ala for forgiveness, and he asked people for forgiveness. But now Allah Ta'ala has worked on him as well. You see, at the last moments, Allah Ta'ala exposes his crimes by his own tongue. He himself tells people what he had been doing. Subhanallah. This is the way of the working of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we need to be careful about what we are doing. And not only is it the punishment in this dunya, then there's divine retribution in the next world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes a person's crimes in this world, and they are punished with the return of that crime in this world. But in the akhirah, they're exposed one more time, but at a greater exposure. That is in front of everyone. All humanity is watching, and their crimes, their life is exposed. And then the adhab in the next world is the adhab, the punishment of Jahannam. Only Tawbah can alleviate the past. And that's what we need to understand here. As human beings, we would all have done something wrong somewhere, all of us, one way or another, one time or another. But the lesson to learn from this is that if we want to avoid the exposure and the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially in the akhirah, then we must put right what we have done wrong. And this will help alleviate us, because our lives are really spiritual. We need to ascend to greater heights, become better people. But we are always weighed down by our crimes, the sins that we have committed. And we need to make tawbah, because when you make tawbah, then those sins are removed. And when those sins are removed, we are lighter. And then we can reach higher up. So that's the point here. Tawbah can alleviate the past. That tawbah should be done in two senses. One, the tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but secondly also, the sorrow that one must show and the forgiveness one must receive from the person you've wronged. Now, if it is at all possible to do that, then a person should go back to the people he's wronged or she's wronged and get that forgiveness from them. If that is not possible because they are dead or it makes the situation worse or something like that, then the person must make dua for that person. The person must speak well of that person, and the person may help those who are connected to that person. For example, if you killed someone and the person's children are still there, then you should help those children. You should give them money, etc., support them in some manner or other to show your sorrow for what you've done to the father of those children, and so on and so on. Finally, I want to look at something of importance to us as individuals. See, regardless of other people's injustice upon us, each individual should concern him or herself with the wrongs that he or she has done before Allah Ta'ala. That's what's important here. It's not about the fact that somebody's done something wrong to you, but what you have done wrong to others. What somebody's done wrong to you, you will be compensated for that. They will be punished for that. And you will be compensated for that on the day of judgment, even in this world for that matter. But what you do wrong is what's most important. That is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to get you for. And when He's going to get you for that, that will matter to you more than anything else. It's what you are accountable for when you stand for Allah that will matter to you. It will not matter to you what somebody else has done to you. The life of this world is a life of test. We are here with imtihan. And that imtihan is there to test us and develop us. So when something goes wrong, someone commits harms upon you, yes, it hurts. Yes, it causes us much grief and pain. However, there are two ways to go about it. One is that a person becomes bitter because of that, and later on in life, as a result of that which has been unresolved and the feelings surrounding that, they then commit those crimes on others. Many people grow up, have a trauma in their earlier years, and then later on, they commit some kind of sin upon someone else who is also vulnerable. So they repeat that process. And as a result of that, what have you done? At one time you were innocent and oppressed, but at another time you've become the oppressor. That has been your response, and that's because of the nafs. The nafs gets involved. The nafs is egotistical. It's arrogant. It's conceited. It has pride. So as a result of that, what it does, it tries to get revenge. It tries to get its back on other people. And often it's not the same person. Often it's somebody else, whoever will be there in the situation of vulnerability to you. So this is the nafs, but the soul and the heart are not like that. They have forgiveness. They have concern, humanity. The soul rises above this and understands that the world is a place of experience. And that experience, especially the difficult experiences, develop us. They make us better. They show us our true nature. They show us who and what we can be if we strive. And they connect us to Allah Ta'ala with each and every crime that's committed upon us, with each and every suffering. We become better people. We draw upon reserves of energy. We draw on reserves of ability that make us better. And then we do not send out negative energy. You see, the way we live in this life, there is positive and negative energies. We can send out a positive energy by doing something good. And with that something good, that righteousness is goodness. And that goodness goes around and comes back upon us. It comes back to us as goodness. But when we send out negative energy by doing harm to someone, then that harm will come back to us in another manner at another time. So whatever we send out will come back to us. If it's positive, positive energy will come back. If it's negative, negative energy will come back. But when harm is done to us, at that moment, we can now send out positive or negative energy, depending on that. The positive energy will be sabr, first and foremost, for that event. The next will be forgiveness against the person who committed that crime. And the third will be that when you find yourself in a position where you can now enact the same crime upon someone else who is also vulnerable in your presence now, you don't do it. You learn from your experience, you understand what it is, and you help that person in their vulnerability to come to a point where they are now self-sufficient. That is where good people are. Good people may suffer, but then they go on and take their suffering, learn from their suffering, and help people who are potentially going to undergo the same suffering. That's good people. Bad people are those who have a suffering, then grow up, get out of that suffering, and then commit that suffering upon someone else. That is where the nafs has taken over. And that's why we must control our nafs. We must control its greed, its ego, its pride, and allow our hearts and souls to overcome it and be the being that we become. One that is in touch with heart and soul, not one that is restricted by the nafs. This is important to understand. This is our development, and that's why our crimes are a means for virtue. The crimes that are committed upon us are a means for virtue, are a means for our development, if we can understand that and if we can strive for that. And just the striving in itself, because of course there's going to be striving, because yes, we all have a nafs, and yes, it is a human trait. We have an amount of dignity and self-respect that we are treated in a bad way. We feel bitter, we feel hurt, we feel angry. These are parts of our nature. However, the struggle is to overcome that, because our aql, intelligence, tells us, no, there's a better way to be than this. This is not the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we struggle to overcome those negative traits that are seething, that are wanting to take over. We struggle to overcome that, and then we become the better person. We become in touch with our soul. We come in touch with the better part of ourselves, our hearts. And when we do not, when we give in, then the nafs takes over. Then we become a dark person. And we go to dark places and we do dark things. So we must understand our suffering in this world. It is temporary. The life of this world is temporary. It is but a momentary life compared to the eternity of what is to come. And a great tragedy would be if we find that in our eternity we are suffering because of a momentary life in which we did the wrong decision. We took the wrong steps. So we need to reflect upon this, inshallah, and learn from this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to do that. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.